Milind Shah, welcome to Stories in AI. How are you today?
Well, thank you, Ganesh, and thank you for having me here. I'm doing great. Really looking forward to this conversation and learning a lot about the things we could be doing together on the AI space and sharing some of what we're up to from an Elevance Health
No,
perspective.
it's amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I know you're on the road, traveling, squeezed up in a little desk in a hotel room in Dallas. I get it. So thanks so much for doing that. Why don't you kick us off with telling us who you are? I mean, what's your background? How did you get to where you got to? And then, how did your journey shape your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So I have the honor and privilege of leading up the strategy and solutions team within inside of our digital organization, Ganesh, here at Elevance Health. And so a lot of what our team focuses on is making sure that while we have amazing delivery teams that build a lot of the exceptional technology and the innovations we are privileged to have here within Elevance Health and make an impact with our members and our providers, we're really focusing on where do we go next in that journey, right? And really looking at how do we continue to differentiate? How do we continue to be competitive? How do we enable and accelerate our enterprise strategy, right, which is critical to us from a digital perspective and ensuring that we can help with efficiencies and opportunities to be a better, partner to our providers and our members at the end of the day. But also looking at how we can grow, right, and look at diversified opportunities for revenue and really making sure that for our shareholders as well, we're leveraging digital as an opportunity to do meaningful things and really helping from a top line perspective. And so that's what we do here as a team. And AI is obviously one of the biggest areas that we're focusing on today. I think everybody, frankly, is within our industry. And myself and Kyle Weber, who's our chief strategy officer, I think sharing this opinion as we talk about this and kind of thinking about the next 5 years in the evolution in the healthcare industry. And while there's always going to be innovation you can have around benefits, right? The core of obviously what we do for a living. And there'll be innovation in how we do contracts and robust networks and other products and services we can be offering. At some point in time, what's going to, I think, make us different from a lot of our competitors and really help us in being unique and that value prop for our members and our providers is really going to come down to the core of data, insights, and experiences, right? And what I mean by that is at some point in time, while all things are going to start looking equal, what's going to start helping us in really moving the needle is going to be how personalized can we get with our members, right? And really truly understanding them and engaging them at the right points of time. How relevant can we be, right? And making sure that we're doing that in a meaningful way. Um, and how much can we actually use that to make an impact, right? We say our goal is being that trusted partner in health at the end of the day in terms of what we pride ourselves on being a part of in the healthcare journey for our members. And so how do we do that better and deeper and more efficiently, right? And AI is going to play a big role, I think, in that as we continue forward along with data and insights. And so that's a lot of also what we think about from a strategy perspective, amongst other areas, and what role digital can really play in that and in helping us kind of differentiate ourselves and our enterprise.
Oh, Milind, there's a lot to unpack here, and I'd love to go really deep in a lot of those areas. But framing this conversation is actually exciting that you brought this up, and you're linking it from just what beyond just what AI, the technology means, to saying like how do you affect that? How do you use that as a tool to go drive the impact, the business impact you're trying to drive? And in all the things that you talk about, like Elevance Health has a history of digital innovation. How do you innovate more, right? I mean, how do you go and maximize the presence you have in the industry in terms of the relationships you have, the patients, the brand, and then further accelerate that and going into the next 5 years, the next decade, if you will. I want to unpack a lot of that here. But what did you do? What's your journey before Elevance? What did you do before that? Just walk us through that.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just jumped right into what's
Oh,
exciting and top of mind for me these days. I apologize for that. But so
oh,
I've been lucky enough to be in this industry for about 20 years, right? And I'm a recovering consultant by trade. And so that's kind of where I started in my journey, working at Deloitte and then doing some other interesting things from a independent consulting route kind of prior to coming here to Elevance. I think what attracted me to this industry, I started primarily in financial services and a little bit of retail, and then started dabbling within the healthcare space. And I think the biggest thing that attracted me to going deep within this industry is at the end of the day, I think we all share in this, but at least I do personally for myself, and being privileged to be a dad of two kids, 8 and 3 now, and kind of always looking for how can I leave a legacy, right? And how can I leave a mark? And where can we truly make an impact in doing something meaningful for society and a community? And healthcare, I think we all know, is one of those opportunities that's just ripe for change. Even in 2024, Ganesh, with all the investments we've had around this space, I think it's probably still safe to say that even today, healthcare is still work, right? For our sickest members, it's a full-time job, right? For people like you and I, who may be lucky to be healthy and be a little bit more astute at how to navigate the healthcare system, it's still something that takes up our time, right? And why is that, right? And that's kind of one of the things that was my passion in kind of getting into the space and saying, is there something I can do with my background from strategy and M&A and post-merger integration side, and then specializing within digital, to truly hopefully make an impact within this space and do something meaningful to leave a legacy. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 20 years, and kind of what's led me to being here at Elevance, Ganesh.
That is awesome. And so profoundly so, right? Wherein you think about, like, I'm a technologist at heart, and I've built, and I'm a builder, engineer, that kind of stuff. And one of the big aha moments for me, and I've built companies in all the other spaces, this time exclusively in healthcare for the last 2 years. And it was exactly the same question. Like, after COVID hit, you look around it and say, as an industry, healthcare produces more than one third of the world's data. Yet,
Yeah.
putting all that data to work to actually drive positive experiences still hasn't really translated, right? So for me as a technologist, it's like, oh, the ultimate mission and the ultimate goal will be like using all that skills to improve the human condition. And what better way to do it than healthcare? And so amazing to see your journey. Very, we have some similarities in the way we actually got to where we are. So that's awesome. So let's unpack this on healthcare itself. Like, talk to us about where you see, those problems that you talked about, right? And then I don't want to dwell too much into the challenges in healthcare, because that'll take up a whole, 3 hour episode, like,
That's a
like
series.
training episode, right? But let's, lay out a future for me in terms of saying, how do you see the general impact of technologies like AI and, maybe quantum and stuff like that over the next 5 years to a decade, right? How do you see, if you were to have this magic wand, and you almost have a magic wand being in a very important position at Elevance, how do you see this transform the industry over the next decade?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of. I always look at things in terms of inspirations, Ganesh, right? And we all have our own inspirations from other industries or other things that we kind of use on a daily basis. So, kind of look at those sometimes as a practical way of saying, well, if someone else can, why can't we, right? Within healthcare, in terms of how I think of that future state. And so, I'll give you a couple of examples of these inspirations, at least in my mind, and kind of pave that to at least my perspective on, I think, where we can be in hopefully the next few years from a healthcare side, right? The first inspiration I'll give you, I think everyone always gives you, is Amazon as a great example, right? And, now having two kids, we happen to be pretty regular users of Amazon Prime, and obviously a lot of things from when both of them were born, and buying things like diapers and wipes and things of that sort, to now doing things like, when my daughter loses a tooth and she writes a letter to the tooth fairy for 3 little silly toys that she wants, and she needs them tomorrow because she thinks the tooth fairy is, going to come at night and deliver those things to her when she puts her tooth under the pillow. Amazon is there to save us, right? And kind of getting those things. And what's interesting is, right, the more and more that you become a user of one of these kind of services, it actually knows more about you, right? And actually not only suggests to you certain things that you should be doing, but it also predicts things that you might be wanting, and it kind of gives you a very different experience, right? If we look at healthcare today, any mobile application, any service that you have, it's still reactive, right? It's waiting for you to take an action and say, wait, let me open something up. Let me tell you something about what happened, and wait, let me react to that, right? But it's never looking at what we can be doing in the future, right? So that's kind of one inspiration I've always looked at and said, well, all right, hey, well, why can't it be, right? Because what's different about, other than the fact that it's retail and healthcare, and sure, you can always give the argument, like everybody does within the healthcare industry, of regulated, difficult, state permissions, all that kind of stuff that you have to go through. But it's still possible, right? And I think it's still something we can do. And then the other inspiration I love to give is, I drive a German car. and German cars have a lot of good tech within it. And I remember, I think it was 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, we were going to take a road trip as a family. And it was somewhere that was about like, 5 hours, 6 hours away, right? And so this was going to be one of those things where you didn't want surprises as you went on that road trip, right? I remember the night before, like most of us do, I looked up the directions, made sure I knew exactly where I was going, made sure I understood the traffic patterns, made sure I knew alternative routes just in case I needed to. And then because my car has this interesting feature, I was able to just basically, share the location of where I wanted to go over to my car, right? So that the next day I didn't have to fiddle around with the GPS and put that stuff in. I could just get in the car and go. And I remember the next morning when I woke up, the mobile app for my car, kind of gave me a little notification. And I was like, hey, what is this? And I looked at it. And the notification basically went through a whole bunch of different kind of what I like to call triages for me, right? It told me, hey, your engine's good, check. Hey, you have enough fluid for your wipers, check, right? Hey, it looks like your brakes are fine, check. Hey, it looks like you're going 6 miles away and you probably want to think about a gas station. Here's two suggestions of what might be good that's going to be on your route, right? Check. And so it did all these things for me proactively just by me basically saying, here's a trip that I want to take and a destination that I want to go to, right? And I didn't even have to think about all those things that, frankly, Ganesh, like just think like those are the things that happen sometimes that disrupt, kind of your journey and your path, right? And if you take that example and you extrapolate it and think about life, right, and think about health and the predictabilities of health, which are never there, right? And you think about all these things that happen and deviate us from going to where we are. Where's that experience for me in healthcare, right? Where I actually have, I mean, forget the check engine light. Even that would be great, right? To be able to know, hey, I'm going on a path where this might be bad news, right? But if your car can do this for your navigation, why can't you navigate your life in such a way where you know all the dips and turns that you should be taking? Because all of us at the end of the day have one goal, right? Like we want to live our best, healthiest, and longest life, especially when you have family and kids and other things that you're thinking about. But there's really nothing there to have your back, right, and really supports you on that. So those are two inspirations that make me think about, well, what if we applied that to healthcare in the future, right? And what if we actually proactively learned about what you're doing and how you're doing things, and we're able to guide you towards the right experiences. And then towards that, what if we could tell you how you're trending, right? And make sure that you're living towards your goals and your personal kind of things that you want to be doing with your life. And really then what happens with that, Ganesh, is healthcare becomes a rearview mirror, right? It becomes something that doesn't disrupt you. It doesn't become something that you have to work at, right? From what I was saying earlier. It just becomes something that's fluid, right? As a part of what you're doing. That's where I'd love to see us get to, right? And I think AI and data and all these other things we're doing can help us get there.
No, you're, what powerful, inspirations and strong examples. I think, when I think about this, and I think about the same challenges, and like, what is it that's stopping us from getting there, kind of thing, right? And I bucketize it in like, three large buckets, and it's like amazing examples. Like, you mentioned check engine light. At a core, you really can, if you understand physics, you understand chemistry, you kind of understand exactly what's going to happen in your car, every part of it, all of that different things. Health and human body is still a mystery for, all the research probably computes up to 1% of the total things that you have to know about the human health, right? So there's that challenge. Now, I think, we'll talk about how AI can solve it and things like that, right? The second thing, and my favorite pet peeve about healthcare, is like we treat healthcare data as being radioactive and nuclear. But if I ask you a question, like you have two spreadsheets, one spreadsheet with all your financial information, all your bank accounts, all your past transactions, who you send money to, how much money you have in which bank, and you have another spreadsheet which is full of your medical history, all your conditions, your past diagnosis procedures that you had.
Yeah.
And which one would you think twice about uploading to a random site on the internet? And the answer almost always is it's the financial service. I don't care about the health data. Yet you would go to, let's say, the Wangfujing district in Beijing, into an ATM with no English characters, swipe your debit card, take out, 1,000 yen, and walk away without even thinking twice about whether the information is going to get stolen and things like that.
Right.
All of that about, right?
Yeah.
So there is a misaligned incentive thing here that I think we it will eventually do. And lastly, I would also say that the three reasons I see it is like one is that like the perception that health data is nuclear and radioactive, and we already the technology exists. We've already solved it for other industries. We can solve it for healthcare. We don't understand. Number two is we don't understand human health. And the last most important thing I believe is healthcare is has traditionally been a very reactive, episodic kind of a thing to do, right? So there's a mindset, there's an incentive translation that you need to actually do, and you guys are doing a great job by focusing on, provider enablement and provider reducing provider abrasion and all of that stuff, including the benefits and patient engagement side of things too. But healthcare is more about care than health, right?
Hmm.
And there is that little nuance here that I think not everybody gets it, not and everybody don't looks at it because it's a very regulated, slow industry, and I'm not for or against regulation. I know you can't talk too much about it, but I think I have my opinions personally, right? But I think there's a lot of we're making strides in the right direction, right? So, but I love those inspirations that you brought up, right? I mean, the you know the Amazon example, and I was thinking like we have this the last year and a half we had the cookie moment in
Hmm.
e-commerce, right, wherein people were tracking movements and it just started blowing up, and Google just announces they won't use cookies to track and all of that kind of stuff. I can't wait for a cookie moment in healthcare, to be honest, because that means you would have actually figured out how to actually look at a patient's journey across multiple avenues, providers, payers, insurance plans, all of that stuff to stitch together a longitudinal view, right? I can't wait for a cookie moment in healthcare.
Yeah.
So, this is, fascinating examples, fascinating examples. Um, Okay, let's shift this into like what can we do about it, and what are you guys doing about it at Elevance? And you and I, exchange a lot of ideas around this topic on, how do you enable the patient, the member, as well as the provider, and elevate their experiences. Just kind of be empathetic to what they're struggling with, and then enable
Yeah.
that, right? Talk about some of the initiatives that you guys are thinking about there and what you're working on.
Yeah, so I'll start with the provider side, Ganesh, on that, and then we can always go to the member because I think everybody talks about the member, and there's, of course, important and interesting things to do there. But sometimes people forget that our providers are probably as important, maybe sometimes even more important of a
More.
customer than our member, right? Because they're our front line, right, at the end of the day in delivering that care. And for us at Elevance, that's a big part of our strategy. And we call it enabling our providers, right? And really thinking about the right data, the right tools, the right mechanisms we can really have for our providers so that they can spend more time practicing at the top of their license and hopefully 5 more minutes with the patient, right, and 5 less minutes in doing all the administrative burden that of course they still have to do as a business, right, but we can make it that much easier. And I think one of the interesting things there that we've I always look at this being I guess a product geek a little bit, right, and looking at learning from our customer, right? And really just humbly saying, we don't know what we don't know, but you help us understand what the problem is, right? And when we sat down with our providers and we said, all right, well, what does it mean to enable you from a technology perspective, especially, right? Because that's where we play a role. And what would be meaningful and important to you, right? In terms of where we can leverage data, insights, AI, and all this amazing stuff that we can unleash and really hopefully creating a better collaboration, right, between both of us at the end of the day. The three things that they told us, which were very interesting, Ganesh, right, was number one, and some of these are obvious, right, but it's always interesting to hear it from them, is don't give me another system to log into, right? I'm already dealing with this annoying thing called an EMR that I have to use because I've been asked to use it. And it's one of these things I have to key in stuff into and look up stuff and, have this workflow that I'm still learning to do things around and already taking time away from my patient. Don't give me one more place that I have to go to just because you're giving me some interesting data or you're going to tell me something earth-shatteringly different, right, that will make me have an impact. Make my life simpler, right? So that was one key design principle I think that we kept in mind in terms of how we're thinking of leveraging digital and AI and really thinking about doing meaningful things with our providers. The second thing that our providers said, which is obvious, but I'll give you my personal story on this of where, even today in 2024, this doesn't exist, is share that data with me in a meaningful, proactive way, right? So it's not good. It's good that I get the data, but it's better if I get the data before I saw Milind, right? Not after I saw Milind, right? And I always give this example for me still in 2024 for me, right? Is that I'm still victim to an industry where when I go see my primary care doc, I actually have to sit in front of my doc and be like, hey, there's a lab I took. Here's a copy of it. I'm going to email it to you. Right. Or by the way, I was traveling and I ended up having a situation. I had to be in an urgent care or an ER. Here's some, notes that I got or a chart that I have. Right. Let me share that with you. Or I saw a specialist, by the way, that was not in your network, but outside of your network. And, here's what they were telling me I had to do. I'm just sharing it back with you because you're my primary care doc and you're my quarterback. Right. And so we burden the member to have, to be hopefully
Be the quarterback. Yeah.
intelligent enough, smart enough, right? Which some of us are, and a lot of us aren't, to be the ones that have to educate the provider about what's happening, right? And all of a sudden, then the provider has to be reactive to that, right? Versus like, oh wait, I thought I studied Milind's chart. I thought I had everything that I need to know. I'm going to come into this and make sure that we put the appropriate care measures for Milind in place so that he can do whatever he needs to, and this isn't bothering him, right? For whatever reason he came to see me. And now all of a sudden I learned things new, right? Variables change and everything becomes dynamic, right? So that, unfortunately, we're still in that industry, right? Where we don't get the information when we need it, right? And so getting the information is one thing, but getting it when we need it is another big thing that our providers told us. And then the third thing they told us, right, is data is great, but give us the insights, right? Because it's going to be great that you can share with me 100 data points of stuff about Milind that maybe you shared with me before that I can study during my morning huddle or in my 5-minute chart review before I go to see Milind. But if I have to look at 500 things and decipher that, right? Well, gosh, that's not going to be easy for me to do, right? And so give me the right insights from that data and really tell me the 2 or 3 things while everything else I can look at later, that I really need to know to make an impact while I have that 15 minutes with Milind while he's, going to be in the room with me. And so those were the 3 design principles, where we kind of looked at this and said, all right, well, in terms of what we do from a provider technology, and then the fourth one, Ganesh, sorry, I forgot, that is also really important is give me a holistic view, right? So great, you can give me his charts, you can give me his labs, that's awesome. But wouldn't I want to know that, well, okay, if Milind's a diabetic and we're having some problems and we're going to calibrate a care plan around him, maybe he's in a socioeconomic situation where there's nuances I need to understand of, well, he can't have access to certain foods, or he's in an area where he can't go for that walk every morning because it's not safe, right? Or there's other variables, right? And so there's other social drivers data, right? As well as even benefits data, right? Like just help me understand enough about Milind's insurance policy so that I can know what he can do and can't do so we can recommend the right care plan. And so those are the 4 kind of design principles, right? That we kind of looked at how we deploy digital technology enablement against, right? To really say, all right, well, how do we actually now solve this problem? And really, one, create a holistic record for our providers to have that has all this information, right? That's not just charts, that's not just labs, but includes all this other information. And then how do we leverage technologies like AI and other digital tools, right? To be able to make sure that it's in the workflow of the provider, has the right insights and meaningful information that's around it. And it enables that provider to, even with the 15 minutes that they have, really change the conversation, right? To hopefully help Milind get on that right care path. So that's an example of something we're doing from a provider perspective, Ganesh, in terms of leveraging this technology and doing meaningful things around it. And that has a cascading effect on things that we could be doing later, right? In terms of the opportunities with our providers. Because once you have this data, and the providers are able to now not have to worry about being the investigator of all of this, then there's also things that they may be doing from an administrative workflow, from a billing perspective or others, where now this data enables them to take the guesswork, right, out of, wait, should I have included this chart or this lab? Or should I have included this one instead, right? And then there's the ping pong effect that happens sometimes from the administrative side as a result of this. And we just say, you know what, reference the what we call the longitudinal patient record, right? The holistic view of Milind. And then whoever needs it for whatever purpose, let them look at whatever they want from that, right? And provider, you take the game out.
No, it's fascinating, and I love that the I look at it like this is the provider enablement stack of capabilities, right? Like hey, get me a complete picture of all the services, all the procedures, all the labs, everything about the patient, make sure the experience is seamless and integrated into my existing workflow. So don't make me learn a new mobile app and UI. Give me insights instead of just the data. Give me a holistic view that encompasses more than their health, their social determinants of health, their benefits information, their preferences, inferred, declared, observed, things.
Mhm.
And then lastly, I think, I added a fifth one, which is like maybe even like kind of a care path adherence, right? And some
Yeah.
way to actually tell, hey, here's where we see the ideal path is. Either you're impacting is changing it or you're adding on to it. Let's have it as a dialogue. The one thing it's fascinating. It sounds so good, right? But one of the challenges I always worry about for these processes, if you look at the data that, health insurance companies have, it's a little late in terms of like you get the,
Yeah.
claims data. And that's your primary insight into how the care is progressing, what kind of care and so forth. Or, you're now requiring the providers to make sure they submit their claims on time,
Mhm.
and the
Mhm.
fact that the claims actually get through and submitted and it's not rejected out. So all of a sudden you're looking at something like, like I just took our son to an ER visit, and it took me 4 weeks to, and I had to go check, and I still haven't gotten a bill, right? Like this thing. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, because it's not submitted, it's not pre-adjudicated, all of that stuff, right? So is there, how do you solve that problem of the data delay, data decay problem, right? Which is,
Yeah.
it takes time. To be proactive, you need to actually integrate more upfront and early on, right? So
That's right.
talk to us
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
And so that's exactly one of the things that we're solving for, right? And the way we look at this, I mean, claims data is always rich data that we're privileged to have, obviously, as a insurance company at the end of the day. And so that's one access point into enriching this information. But there's other sources where we can get this information connect, right?
Yeah.
There's partnering with the actual electronic medical record
Yep.
systems, right? Whether
Your
it be your Epic,
HIEs, your,
your
yep.
Avinas, et cetera. There's HIEs, exactly to your point, that we could be partnering with, right? There's third-party sources like Validic and other places where we can tap into interesting nuances of data, right? And so I think what we're looking through as well in terms of how we create this, what we call longitudinal patient record, is how do we do that in a way? And we have some interesting vignettes, I'll call it, right, of things that we've actually learned because we've been on this journey now for about 2 years, in impact to our providers, right? Of where one of the problems, for example, that our industry has, especially with our primary care docs, is I don't know of a situation of where Milind has been admitted or discharged in an early enough time where I can actually then intervene in that, in that care path to actually make a difference for Milind, right? The standard right now, still in 2024, Ganesh, is 8 weeks for a primary care doc to know that Milind was admitted and discharged, and here was the specifics around that, right? We call that an ADT in our industry in terms of like the actual encapsulation of that. We have been able to find out ways of tapping into different ways of getting that information, of where we can now get that to the primary care doc in as less as 8 to 12 hours, right?
Wow.
Which is amazing, by the way, right?
Which is
Because now
great.
I'm arming that primary care doc to say, hey, hang on a second. Milind was somewhere and he was admitted, and there's looks like something here that I should intervene
So
on. Let me just drop Milind a note, right? And say, hey, sorry this happened. Hopefully you're okay. Do you want to come in and
I
next
should
week we talk about this?
I
Um,
should switch to your care health plan, because I remember, like, a previous ER visit, and when we went to my son's, primary care physician, and we was like, hey, we did this. Oh, really? That happened? I'm like, yep, that was like 3 weeks ago. I'm like,
yeah,
oh, I see. Did you get that scan report that they actually did? Like, what scan
exactly.
report? I'm like, okay, can you request that? Because when I request that, they said I have to fill out a form, and and they're like, you know what, you should just call them and ask them to fax it to you. I'm like, I don't have a fax number. I mean, like, this just like, come on, guys, we're living 2024, right? So no, but
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing, right? I mean, these are when people get enamored by, when they talk about things like AI, they get enamored by, oh, let's actually summarize something, give it out. But the core, the gut of these issues are in things like interoperability, things like data transfer, things like,
Mhm.
when you get 15 different kinds of data, how do you normalize it to
Yep.
uh,
Yep.
put a data model that actually you can understand something about it
Mhm.
on a longitudinal basis and so forth. And,
Yep.
quite frankly, we've been, for the last 2.5 years at Autonomize, we've been at it, trying to solve the more foundational problems like this using foundation models, of course, and then being able to translate that to different workflows and different insights across workflows and so forth. But these are amazing examples, and I can't tell you how. I mean, no offense to all my previous guests from healthcare, but then just being able to you really opened up this thing and saying going right into it and making it real for people to understand. Like these are the problems you're solving. Switch gears to members, right?
Yep.
Outside of a nice member app, then I get a not you, another kite. I gotta do all these dings in this call, right? In this thing. It's not the Elevance Health. It's a competitor insurance health plan, and I get invited for this weight loss management program. And I keep telling, and I go there and I put in some things, and it says you're not eligible. I still get the emails over and over every month and say you haven't signed up for this yet. I'm like, it's a free benefit. You should do it. I'm like, I don't need to. You told me I don't need to lose any weight. So, tell me about the and there's aspect of personalization we talked about, and member experience. Like, talk about some of the innovations you guys are doing on that front, and how do you avoid that issue that I just talked about?
Yeah, and so I think what's interesting in terms of how we look at this from a member experience perspective is there's two big areas. I think the fundamental is obviously creating an experience that members would trust, right? That you come into, right? At the end of the day, so you joked about obviously like a competitor app of ours, but we've been lucky enough to be recognized for having one of the best healthcare applications in terms of a member experience at the end of the day, and we're privileged and we appreciate that feedback from our members, right? But that doesn't mean we're done, and we obviously have to continue to do more. And so I think from that foundation we've built of hopefully now creating that trusted entry point of our mobile app being a place where members want to go to for at least their healthcare needs. There's two examples I'll give you, Ganesh, of things where we're trying to do things, I think, in the spirit of that Amazon example, right? And really trying to do kind of innovative things, leveraging AI and data and insights and just kind of having disruption from a digital perspective.
Yep.
One is, I think, one of the interesting things we're doing around how do you find the right doctor when you actually know who you're looking for, but you don't know which one to see, right? And so take, an age-old example of I've moved and now I have to find a new primary care doc because the one I used before is obviously in a different place. And, I loved her or him, and now I need to find somebody like that. Right. And there's a lot of these variables, right, that go into making that decision. And some of
Yep.
them are basics, right? Like, are they in network or not? Are they within, 5 miles from me or not? Right. But we actually do very unique things there in looking at, well, okay, because we're privileged to know enough about you as a member, right, from however long you've been with us. Can we look at, for example, okay, Milind, if we know you're dealing with congestive heart failure, diabetes, and cholesterol, and probably as you're looking for a primary care doc, you want somebody who knows this stuff well, right? Who
Yep.
can actually take care of you because they take care of other members in a quality way around these areas. And so, how do we intersect that information we know about you with the information we know of our network,
Yep.
right? And the quality of that network that we have to say, okay, well, we call it personalized match, Ganesh, right? And we joke sometimes about the naming of that. It's not, it's not a dating thing. It's obviously about finding the right doctor.
Yeah.
But the focus of that is really just, how do we make sure that if we know a lot of information about you already, we guide you in that experience of where you don't have to do all that hard work, right?
Yep.
But hopefully the first 2 or 3 results that come up for you, we've done some of that thinking for you, right? And really
That's
help take the
amazing.
guesswork out of the homework you might have to do afterwards, right? Because you'll find the doctor that's within 5 miles and kind of 20 minutes to get to, but then you'll call and you'll say, well, here's my healthcare needs, and they'll go, well, I don't really see patients like that. And you'll say, well, crap, I got to go back and look for a new one now, right? And so that's one of the areas where we're leveraging AI and really doing meaningful things from a digital perspective. But we take that further, right? And we say, all right, well, those are fundamental things that we want to make sure that we know, right? But then how do we take that further in our roadmap and our journey in the future to say, well, you probably have other preferences, right? You probably want this person to be a certain ethnic background, maybe because you want them to speak a language, right? Or you want them to be, a male or a female, or you want them to have come from a certain academia, because for a
Yep.
lot of our people, there are certain things that matter in really truly finding that right doctor that you're,
Yep.
especially as a primary care doc, right? Like going to trust as your quarterback. And so, how do we learn as you actually look through those different
Absolutely.
variables, right? To say for the next time, and the next time, and the next time, we know that you looked for these things, and so maybe they're important to you. And so, how do we match
Yep.
that next provider that you're looking for based on those variables as well? And so that's one example of something we're doing, Ganesh, from that member experience side that truly goes back to, that Amazon example, right? Of like
That's
knowing you well enough
beautiful.
to know
Yeah.
what
You
you
get
need to
your,
do.
except you don't get the suggestion saying you should see your GI specialist today, right?
Right. Well, and so that's the other thing I was just going to mention, right? Is then the other big area where we connect that too, right? That brings into this experience is what we call next best action, right?
Yep.
And so what next best action is okay, if we know enough about you and the things that are important for you in your care journey, right? And maybe one of them is recommending, by the way, that as a part of your care journey, here's a suggestion of a doctor you need to see, right? Or a
Right.
suggestion of an action you need to take. Again, how do we make it easy for a member to not, in the spirit of what I was saying before, right? Not make healthcare work, but make healthcare something that just is a part of your
Absolutely.
journey. And we're really taking that work upon us. And so the other area, which is next best action that we focus a lot on, right? Which, I think a lot of the industry, we've been doing NBA for, a lot of years, I think, as an industry, right? And that's a big area for AI from the days of machine learning, natural language processing, and now obviously from a Gen AI perspective. But I
Yep.
think where we're doing things unique from where our industry is focusing is in really looking at this from multidimensional variables, right? And really looking at it from your health perspective, from your employer benefits perspective, right? Because maybe your employers have certain things that they want you to follow, right? As a part of doing certain things. In certain industries, you have that, right? Of things like taking a flu shot by a certain time or doing your annual wellness visit, et
Yep.
cetera. How do we bring those variables in, right? As a part of what we're doing from an MBA perspective, and not just make it the transactional routine. Hey, you should, update your information so that we have the latest and greatest about you. Or hey, looks like you don't have a primary care doc, you should probably go look for one. Like those are all routines that are necessary
Yeah. Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
think the industry does well from MBA, but we're doing something I think a little bit further, right, from where a lot of our competitors are. Those are two examples, Ganesh, from a member experience perspective of what we're
Yep.
doing, leveraging data insights, and really thinking different about digital.
That is, fascinating. It's just like I can't wait for all of us to get to that future. You're right. I mean, like this, I love the personalization example that you said. In fact, like when I was looking for a new PCP, and by the way, I'll let you know, I took a One Medical membership. So I'll see how that goes. And I'm actually excited about it, but they don't have enough providers, all of that kind of stuff. But let's say we get through that and we're still early. And when I look for a provider, I'll look for some kind of an athletic background because I feel that they connect and empathize with me a lot. So I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
what does this provider do? What does she do? That kind of stuff. So that's important to me. But almost nobody gets that other than if you really pay the attention on either my past providers that I use and who I actually took the time to go into the mobile app and give 5 stars because they're awesome, or any feedback or HRA that actually I submitted and things like that. So it's fascinating. So that personalization goes a long way. I mean, we did a very interesting work with another health plan, and where we actually personalize their the messages that we actually send them around certain aspects of their, hey, you're actually having a gap, you should go fill, and things like that. But we just used a little bit of personalization around some of the work that they did with understanding and profiling the patients in a good way. Basic things. HRA completion rate, boom, it's like 10 to 15% more in the first month. I'm like, how did
Right.
that happen? Just being able to address somebody saying, instead of saying Mr. last name, just calling them by first name and telling them,
Mhm.
hey, when you called the last time to the call center, you mentioned this as a thing. I hope you better. I mean, just that little thing. I know these are all regulated stuff, so you got to be careful what you put in there. But then there's like little nudges that you can do. The impact of personalization goes a long way. So it's pretty amazing. And one thing I always wonder, and you guys are a you know big giant company. It's things are everybody probably feels things can go a little bit faster because you have a lot of moving parts and a lot of people, a lot of organizations and groups and stakeholders to bring along, right? Two parts of a question. One is, how do you leverage ecosystems, and how do you actually maximize your rate of innovation if it's not all going to come from one place, right? And then the other part is like, how do you then bring along a large organization to go make this happen, right? To get that to fruition. It's fascinating ideas, and so I'm curious on that front.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can speak for most of our industry, Ganesh, and probably making the statement of, I think we'd all be foolish to think that all this great stuff that we can be thinking about, that aspiration in terms of that future state in digital, that we could do by ourselves, right? It's not realistic, right? And I don't think there's been any example of any transformation in any industry where one company did it exclusively all by themselves. Right? It always takes partners. It always takes an ecosystem. If you think about the AI space, and we've been looking at this a lot, knowing especially that while we're privileged to have a lot of great talent and a lot of great opportunity to do some of these things on our own, it's going to take a village, right, to actually get through this transformation especially from a Gen AI side, right? And fun fact I shared with a couple of our leaders a couple of weeks ago when we we're having this conversation around ecosystem for Gen AI is if you look at any of the literature that's out there, Rock Health or any of these other companies, right? Just last year alone, VC funding in AI was about 50 billion, right? And from that 50 billion, I think about 10 billion of it was specifically within healthcare or digital health, however you want to
Sure.
classify it, right? And so there's a lot of movement within this industry. And it's not coming from us directly. It's coming from intelligent folks like you and others that are out there that are really saying, wait, I have an awesome idea. And I think with that idea, I can do something meaningful. And they're actually getting attention, right, from a lot of these folks that want to put some capital against this because they see that opportunity for that to bloom and grow and prosper into an actual viable business at the end of the day. And so if we look at that and you kind of we looked at that specifically in the AI space to kind of I like to classify the companies in kind of two buckets, right? There's the folks that'll help us in building what we call our platform at the end of the day, right? And things like
Sure.
security, scalability, compliance, ethics, responsibility, and then just other things you think about from a platform side. But there's also a lot of companies that are creeping up that are more on what I just call the use case side, right? Whether they be specific use cases in a healthcare context like or network contracting or anything specific to us, right? Or they be general business kind of use cases, right? Like HR, marketing, sales, service, right? Which, yes, there's a nuance for us in what we do there, but they're kind of general use cases for any industry. Or they even be around what we call IT functions, right? And things like helping with low code, no code, or
Yep.
QA automation or other areas where Gen AI is also deployed as well. Within both of those buckets, if you look specifically in the healthcare space at roughly that 10 billion in investment, there's about 650 real companies that are out there. There's probably a lot of other companies that are there
Yeah,
too,
I
but there's
agree.
about 650 companies that are out there that are invested, have amazing talent like yourselves, are actually doing meaningful things with clients, and then at the end of the day, right, like they're seeing results from that and the growth of their business as well. And so obviously we look at that and say, okay, well, there's something here where there's an opportunity for us to do this very differently in accelerating our impact to scale and really looking differently at how we dispense capital, right? Because it's one thing to say put bodies and put funding against it and get it done in a year. It's another thing to say, wait, maybe there's a unique opportunity to work with one of these organizations and not just accelerate what we're doing, but flex our dollar differently
Yep.
also, right? And what we can get as a opportunity for an investment or a unique, partnership with one of those type of companies. And so I think that's an obvious for us within the AI space, and that's something that we'll continue to look at. Um, and to the second part of your question, right, I think is, as we do this, what's been, I think, great for us because of the buzz, especially like take Gen AI as an example, is we haven't had to do much convincing of our business. Our business has actually come to us and gone, where can we actually do this? Because they're seeing what we're doing with other areas and they're kind of feeling this, FOMO, I guess, a little bit, right?
Yep.
Of
Yep.
I need to be there because if I'm not, I'm missing out at the end of the day. And so what we're actually getting in our situation right now is we're oversubscribed. That's also where the ecosystem helps us do this very differently, right? Because at some point you reach a practicality of capacity and you can't do things in the traditional build mode, but you want to still work at the pace of your business who wants things yesterday, not even today, forget
Yep.
tomorrow. And then you can actually leverage this ecosystem to accelerate, right, some of those opportunities from an incubation and a pilot perspective. And I think, luckily for us in this Gen AI space is there's so much low hanging fruit, Ganesh, in terms of operational efficiency
I
that,
agree.
we're able to do things sometimes that take, hundreds or more in terms of time and reduce that by 50, 60%, right? And so that means people can do more, right? And actually be
Can do
focusing on
more
the things that they
meaningful
need to do
stuff, and
versus
yep.
exactly versus the administrative stuff that they were doing. And so what part of a business wouldn't want that, right? At the end of the day. And so I
Right.
think just luckily from where Gen AI is today and where there's a lot of opportunity, that low hanging fruit is giving us that demand. I think that's very different than
That's
what
amazing.
happened in the past where we have to go convince and you have to build a business case and you have to go and almost sell, right, your idea to the business and say, please work with me. We're getting the opposite of where our business is coming to us, right? And now what we have to think through is how we do the right things for us that are meaningful, differentiated, and special that we want to keep internal, but then where we can deploy the ecosystem to continue to
Absolutely.
have that impact at scale and meet that demand. And also learn from the smarts of other people that are out there,
Yeah.
right? Like
No, I'm
yourselves
with
and
you.
others, so that we can be better at the end of the day in solving these problems.
And it's what a fascinating discussion. I love how you weaved in both the technology opportunity with very specifically how it can actually impact the business outcomes. And it's so true on, like, we're very fortunate as well, like as a smaller early stage company, to be able to really kind of like, you come in with so much institutional knowledge and understanding, and the network and the people, the understanding of the population, if you will, of the all the covered members. And then it's just fascinating to how open some of those companies, some of you are, to actually just bring in external innovation to see how we can accelerate. Because end of the day, we're trying to maximize the outcome for the member, for the patient, for people and people's health, right? So, Milind, this was a fascinating discussion. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed it, because I mean we covered so much ground, and I probably we would love to have you on a follow up, on a part two, just to go deeper in some of these spaces and stuff. But thank you so much for taking the time. This was amazing. How can the listeners and viewers get in touch with you? Where can they find you on the internet?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me here, Ganesh. It's a privilege to be on this platform and have this opportunity to share these amazing ideas with talented folks like yourself. It's also great to learn. So I appreciate the dialogue and the feedback as well. One call out I'll make before answering your question is, just going back to where we started at the end of at the beginning of this. No one person, no one company is going to solve this problem in healthcare on its own, right? And so my call to action for all the listeners and for just all my peers out there is, at the end of the day, if we keep this theme in mind of let's take the work out of
Let's take
healthcare,
work
let's
out.
figure out how we do that together. And we're privileged and honored to be a part of that. And I thank everybody that's a part of this journey, because it's going to take a village to make it happen. But that's where I think all of us that are in this at the end of the day, I'm probably not the only one that wants to leave a legacy. We'll have that opportunity to look back and
Absolutely.
say, we did something meaningful here.
Let's,
And so that's what I look forward to. And so for the folks that want to reach out to me, find me on LinkedIn, Milind Shah. You can reach out to me directly, if you feel like, and then feel free to keep this dialogue going. Ganesh, I appreciate that opportunity. Look forward to coming back for a part two of
I'd
this,
love
if you
that.
will, and kind
I
of
love
geeking out
that. Let's
deeper
to
on these things. Um, thank
no,
you
thank
for
you.
thanks for all the things you
Thanks
do,
for
Ganesh. At the end of the day, I
honoring us
appreciate
with
it.
your presence, and thanks for the insights. Really, really, deep, and lot to ponder on. Lot for innovators and people all over the industry to actually just take away from. So let's work together to take the work out of healthcare. So really appreciate you getting on the show. Thank you.